Welcome, hungry people. My name is Nissan Machuca, and this is smoked brisket. So, what we're gonna start cooking today, we're gonna be making a full packer brisket, meaning it's the whole chest of the cow. You have both the point and the flat meat on here. Pretty cool. So traditionally these are cooked in an offset smoker or a stick burner. So you have essentially the main oven or where you grate, where you put the meat inside, but then on the side you have logs and coals that actually feed the fire, feed the heat, and with smoke passing through and a kind of type of convection, it actually slowly cooks down the meat. Well, that's more of a traditional style. Unfortunately, I don't have a stick burner or offset smoker, which is okay. I do have a pellet smoker. Ever since Traeger actually invented them, they really has changed the game. I mean, almost anyone now can smoke their meat, and honestly, if you don't have a smoker, you can do the same thing in your oven, just at a very low temperature. Just in your seasoning, you probably want to put a little bit of a liquid smoke or anything like that to add a nice smokiness to your meat. Alrighty guys, I'm hungry. Let's get to cooking. So one important thing to realize is any kind of protein or any kind of meat, there's a lot of moisture. So you want to make sure you pat the meat dry. And I love these shop towels because it absorbs so much moisture. Remember, wet meat is dangerous. Also, a dull knife is dangerous. You want to make sure you get your knife sharpened. Shout out to Will from work. He did an awesome job sharpening my knives. Honestly, really do appreciate his hard work there. Alright, let's get started. So what we want to start removing is not just the fat, but there's a lot of connective tissue. This stuff is not going to render, and if it does a bit, it's going to end up chewy. You don't want a chewy product. So simple, clean cut here. And keep in mind, this is a 17-pound brisket. 17.16 pounds, so we have a lot we can trim out, and we're still going to end up with a good yield here. You can be as detailed as you'd like on how much you trim off. Honestly, today we're going to go for a medium type. We're not going to do any type of a competition cleanup. We're going to make sure we get the main parts of fat that are not going to render. Yes, fat is flavor, but really what it is renderable fat is flavor. If the fat doesn't render, it's a pocket of goo, does not taste good. And here is a big chunk of fat that is not going to break down. And you're going to be able to see, if you notice here, no meat, all fat. So one thing to remember, the point muscle itself, this side of the muscle of the brisket itself is a lot fattier than the flat. Let me actually show you here. The flat here, super lean piece of meat. We're probably gonna leave a 1/4 inch of fat on here to protect it from the radiant heat of the cook. The point, on the other hand, we're probably gonna remove most, if not all, the fat on top. It's gonna have enough fat to keep it nice and moist. Let's get that hand a little bit. And you can go based off sections. I usually like to start a little here, a little there, just to kind of work my way into the main part of the brisket here. And again, I mean, you don't have to be as detailed. You don't have to be detailed. A lot of people sometimes, they barely trim anything. A lot of people just leave all this fat here and then just cook it off. It's personal preference. My personal preference, I like my meat naturally juicy. Just continue to go around the meat here on the point side. Try leaving as much meat as possible and shape your brisket so it's more aerodynamic, so the smoke can go around it. And around here, around this point here, you're gonna start getting into the flat muscle. Kind of see the separation here. So then here we're gonna start leaving more of the fat, but we'll get to that right now. Keep in mind, things like this will happen. The butcher will nick it a couple times. Try to clean that up as much as possible. If not, it's okay. Don't worry too much about it. After such a long cook, you won't even notice it. But just me. Let me show you here. So this gray meat here, during the packaging process, what happens is they use hot water. So that's why it's kind of grayish meat. It's still edible. I just don't like the way it looks, so I'm just gonna cut it off. Again, you can leave it on. It's all personal preference. I do want to give a shout out to my wife for being my camera person. She is pregnant, so meat's not always the preferred thing to record. Yeah, like I said, I'm probably gonna end up scoring the fat just a little bit, just so it can help it render down. So just a simple, easy score. Okay, you don't have to do this. Just kind of want to help the fat render a little bit. And the good thing is we can get a little bit more seasoning into the meat. So smoke and seasoning don't actually penetrate through the fat. So this way we're actually able to get the seasoning in a little bit more as well. We're actually going to be cooking it fat side down. There's no, for me, there's no actual preference of fat side up or down. I usually face the fat side where closer to the main heat source. So if I have radiant heat coming from the bottom, I put the fat facing down. If I have heat coming from the top, like an offset smoker, I put fat side on top. This kind of has an extra thermal barrier. This here is all one glob of fat here. So essentially it's a decal of fat, right? This is all fat. You could use it in some sausages or in your ground beef or burgers, but you see this? All fat. It's not gonna render down, so it's not really gonna impart any flavor into your brisket. Now, whenever we cut the brisket after the cook, we want to go against the grain. So we notice here these muscle fibers are actually running this way. So one thing I actually learned from Big Mo Carson, he's a pit master. He actually likes to cut a little tab. See, I kind of already did it here, but let me cut a little bit bigger tab here. And that way he knows this direction is where the muscle fibers are running. So, real simple. He knows whenever you get the brisket, he can just start slicing without having to second guess it. So let's go ahead and season the backside or the underside of the brisket first, and then we'll season the top on the far. This is a big piece of meat, so it can handle the seasoning. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be dry brining the brisket today. So we're actually doing this a day before we actually start to cook. So what dry brining does is salt actually will extract the moisture from inside the meat, opening up the pores of the meat fibers. So it'll actually start opening up the pores, pull out the moisture, and then it's actually going to reabsorb the salt. So then the salt actually is going to be penetrated within the meat fibers, if that makes sense. Alrighty, let's go ahead and take it into the fridge and basically finish up for tonight. Probably have checked if the fridge closes first. And it does. Alrighty guys, see you guys in 24 hours to continue the cook. Alrighty guys, so it's been 24 hours, and if you can see here in the brisket, after it's been dry brined, a pellicle has been formed. So there's like a nice sticky pellicle which allows a attachment of the rub, the rest of the rub, And as well, the salt actually has been absorbed into the meat. So see this nice smooth sticky texture. You see down here are the salt granules. Well, it's not on the meat, remember, it was completely covered in it. Well, it's been completely absorbed. So this is going to be our presentation side, the top side of the brisket. So let's go ahead and flip it over. Let's go ahead and flip it over, and let's start rubbing it with a little bit of mustard as a binder to attach the rest of the rub. And don't really worry too much about the flavor of the mustard. It's not really going to come through. It's just thick enough to where it allows everything else to kind of stick to the meat. Okay, so little nice nooks and crannies here. Not too heavy. We'll go light on the seasonings. So you notice how I start from this side. I start from the right side. I'm right-handed, so I start from where I start. From the right side, from my right hand, and I work my way left. Now your end will probably look like the opposite. It just gives me a little bit more control of how the seasoning sprays out. And like a typewriter, just going back and forth. Onion as well. Won't do too much onion, just a little bit. Freshly ground black pepper. I actually like to use steak seasoning as texture for it. Not too much. It does have some salt, but it should be okay. So the steak seasoning is actually going to help create a nice bark, how they call it. So it looks like that this cow has been covered pretty well. Alright, let's go put it on the smoker. So the reason for the water is obviously to add moisture to the cook. Now I pre-boiled the water just so that it can get a head start, because if we actually do cold water in here, it's going to shock it and the smoker is going to work twice as hard to bring up the temperature. It already has the cold meat to bring up to temperature, and then it's going to need the actual water. So that's why I preheated the water pan or the bowl, and I preheated my water. See you in a couple hours. Good morning. So the brisket has been on for approximately 7 hours and a half. So just like I thought, 6 to 8 hours to get to the right texture that we're looking for and color, and then we're gonna wrap. So let me go ahead and show you how that looks. Water pan did its trick. See how the water levels went down. And here we have the beautiful brisket. Now I'm thinking it's like around 165-ish. Okay, so just about over. You kind of see that, how it's going in a little smoother. It's always going to be a little tighter on the flatter side. Perfect. So yeah, this is the color you want. Let's go ahead and wrap up. So I would say probably in the next 2 hours, I'm going to start to check for doneness, probing it for tenderness. We're looking probably between 195 to 205, preferably not over that, because you want the brisket to be nice and tender, but you don't want it to be shreddable, right? You want slices of brisket. So we'll see you guys in a couple hours. Oh yeah, there's a nice jiggle to it. Let's jump back here. Yeah, going in nice and smooth. Perfect. Let's go ahead and wrap the sucker up in a little bit of saran and let it rest for a couple hours. Alrighty guys, moment of truth. The brisket has been rested, is rested, and it's time to unravel this gift. If you have a fireplace or you have like you need essentially fire starter, this is actually good because it's lined with fat and grease, so it actually catch a lot faster and you can actually start your fire. One benefit of saran wrapping it while it's resting is the juices distribute evenly throughout the meat, giving you a evenly moisture piece of meat. That's what the restaurants do. Out. Nice king, tears apart. And to try it out. That's some good meat. And you see here, I don't really like to squeeze the meat, but look at all those juices here. Alrighty guys, so thank you very much for watching. If you like what you're seeing here, hit the subscribe button, the like button, comment down below, and we'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoy.